Hello and welcome to this Musical Steps movie from the series of videos where I stroll around places associated with music artists and specific songs. Slightly different to previous videos though, for this particular episode, I'm going to spread the information across more than one movie. I'm doing this because I want to initially set the scene in the first of these episodes by talking about the UK pop charts at the beginning of the 1970s, before then talking about a specific songwriter in the subsequent movie who was famous and unknown at the same time. His fame just depended on where you were in the world. So, before beginning the walk associated with the main subject of this Musical Steps video, the somewhat forgotten singer-songwriter Lally Stott from the Merseyside area of the UK, I want to spend time in this first episode putting into context how the UK pop charts looked half a century ago. This is to show how big a particular Lally Stott written song was at the start of the 1970s. By the way, the footage that you see here in this first episode is of the general area Lally Stott lived in before making his considerable fortune in Italy. So, let's consider the 1970s music scene. Just over 50 years ago, back in 1971, of the year's 52 available weeks, around 5 songs competed to sell the most records of that year. On the whole, the number ones of 1971 have stood the test of time and still resonate with audiences when heard today. However, 1971 was bookended by what could be described as novelty number one songs. As the year began, from January the 5th, 1971, the comedy actor Clive Dunn had his overly sentimental and lyrically saccharine song Grandad at number one for 3 weeks. Though popular at the time, I think it's fair to suggest it's only now remembered by nostalgic audiences, thinking back to their youth. It's not considered a great song. And then at the end of the year, the comedian Benny Hill reached number one on December the 7th for 4 weeks, with a comedy song called Ernie, the fastest milkman in the West. Again, it's a song only really fondly remembered through rose-tinted glasses, by some people that were young teenagers at the time. Right in the middle of the year, in June, was another song that reached the top spot and was, perhaps incorrectly, regarded at the time as a novelty song too. And it's the writer of that song who is the main focus of this sequence of movies. We'll get back to that songwriter later. For now, to put into perspective what the UK music scene was like post-Beatles breakup, let's consider the UK charts in 1971. One artist that released music that year was the still relatively unknown David Bowie. Though Bowie had had a hit with Space Oddity 2 years before, he was regarded as a novelty act because of that song. Despite it being a success, it was regarded at the time as a novelty song, and Bowie himself, by struggling to find a follow-up hit, had been written off as a one-hit wonder. Bowie was still struggling for further recognition in 1971. 2 years after Space Oddity. It wasn't until the following year, when his single Starman became one of 2 of the most talked about songs of 1972, that he established himself as a serious artist with longevity. The other much talked about song of 1972 was Alice Cooper's School's Out. What Bowie and Alice had in common was image. Both realised audiences now wanted more than rock stars in jeans. In 1971 though, David Bowie had changed his name from David Jones and recorded his 4th album, Hunky Dory, between June the 8th and August the 6th, before it was released on the 17th of December. Hunky Dory was a different type of album for Bowie in terms of songwriting, because he had written most of the songs on piano, rather than on guitar, as he had done for his previous albums. Bowie didn't play piano, or at least not very much, on the album though. Instead, he got Rick Wakeman to play on Hunky Dory, and most notably on Life on Mars. At the time, Bowie asked Wakeman to join his band. Rick Wakeman was the keyboard player at the time for a band called the Strawbs, and had also been asked to join a new progressive rock band called Yes. Wakeman said no to Bowie and yes to Yes. Despite Hunky Dory being regarded today as one of Bowie's best albums, it didn't sell well at the time because it didn't seem to contain any songs that could be hit singles. This is despite it containing songs such as Life on Mars and Changes. Hunky Dory as an album flopped, as did the single Changes that was released at the start of January 1972. Anyway, getting back to 1971, Mark Feld had also recently changed his name to Mark Bolan. His band T-Rex had two singles at number one a few months apart that year. Hot Love first, and then, a couple of months later, Get It On, or Bang a Gong as it was called in America. Owing to Bang a Gong being sexual slang, Bolan's song was renamed Get It On for the UK market. And Get It On was a huge selling single in 1971, but it didn't sell quite as many as its predecessor, Hot Love. After its 6-week run at number one, Hot Love racked up enough sales to become the 5th best-selling record of the year. Remember though, those were the days people had to leave their house and take a trip to a record shop to physically buy a copy of a vinyl record. The ease and comfort of clicking a buy now or play button on a mobile phone didn't exist.